Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Again, we're continuing on in our book, Living by the Book by Hendricks. And again, we have PDFs that we're sort of releasing for each chapter so you can follow along and do the exercises and really take action in taking notes and going deeper in studying the Bible yourself. We are actually on chapter 10, so let me turn there right now. We're on chapter 10. And again, Hendricks is talking about 10 strategies for first-rate reading. And I'm going to read the 10 just to get them ingrained in our minds. Again, number 1, read thoughtfully. Number 2, read repeatedly. Number 3, read patiently, which that's what we're going to look at today. Number 4, read selectively. 5, read prayerfully. 6, read imaginatively. 7, read meditatively. 8, read purposefully. 9, read acquisitively. And 10, read telescopically. So we are on chapter 10 of Living by the Book, read patiently. And he says there's an old saying that nothing good happens fast. Have you heard that? Nothing good happens fast. It takes time. He says highly skilled readers devote a lot more than 5 minutes to a task to be done. They've learned to approach Scripture using the third strategy of first-rate reading, which is read the Bible patiently. And it's a hard assignment for many of us because we live in a fast-paced world and a microwave culture where we want everything and we want it now. We want it fast. If we can't get it fast, then we don't want it. And we do not want to approach Scripture in that way, right? He says the fruit of the Word takes time to ripen. He says others give up on the biblical text and turn instead to secondary sources. He says the moment they think they're in over their heads, they make a mad dash for a commentary to find what other significant saints have to say. He says in the process, you ruin the experience. He says there's nothing wrong with using secondary sources, but they shouldn't be your primary sources because the primary source that we should be using is the Bible, right? Is the Bible. And so you don't want to, you want to drench your mind in the biblical text, in the truth, not just go straight to secondary sources. And he says the next heading is in it for the long haul. He said there's a vast difference between running sprints and running cross country. To do the latter, you need to develop the kicker. He says the second wind. You've got to prepare for the long haul, is what he says. So it is with patient Bible reading. You have to develop some stamina, some staying power to hang on with the text until you start to make some progress. And he suggests a few things to help, actually 3 things to help in doing this. Number 1, work with one book for 1 month. Work for one book, or with one book for 1 month. I love that. In Bible study, he talks about 5 weeks with a book is usually enough time to make some significant headway. And it really is. I don't know if you've done that or not, but I'll do that once in a while. I'll take maybe the 31 Proverbs, right? 31 chapters in Proverbs, just dwell on that, and I'll get into that for a month or 2. Just straight Proverbs. Sometimes I'll do Psalms. Other times I'll do a New Testament book. Sometimes I'll do Old Testament book. But he says in 5 weeks you can read through a book of the Bible several times. You can observe its structure, identify key terms, investigate the central characters, do some background work with secondary sources, and decide on some practical ways to apply the truths of the book to your life. And he says the point is that in a month's time, you can begin to take ownership of that book of the Bible. He says a few suggestions to get you started doing this. Start in the book of Nehemiah or Jonah, the Gospel of Mark, 1 Corinthians, Philippians, James, or 1 Peter. He says Nehemiah, Jonah, and Mark are user-friendly narratives with plot and characterization. The 4 other books mentioned are letters to Christians that are short and practical. You won't have much trouble figuring out what the writers are trying to say. So, number 1, work with one book for 1 month. It is incredibly, I've done it, it's incredibly beneficial. Number 2, zoom in and zoom out. Start with a wide angle, back off and get the big picture by reading the book in its entirety. He says, see if you can detect a flow in the material, a progression of events or ideas, then zoom in on something that seems pertinent or prominent. And if you use this month-long approach, spend a week or so on that one event and just dig into it. He says after you've zoomed in to study a particular event or concept or word, make sure you zoom back out to recall the big picture. He says, remember, you don't want to end up with a lot of disconnected fragments, but rather with a unified whole in which all the details fit in with the overall message of the book. And then number 3, he says, alter your approach. He says there is more than one way to study Scripture. The more strategies you use, the more insight you will gain. And the way to hang in there for a long haul of Bible study is to vary your approach, just as runners vary their pace. I love that. In subsequent chapters, we'll talk about some different techniques you can use with different kinds of materials. And he ends this chapter 10, with 2 principles of patience. 2 principles of patience. He says the keys to reading the Bible patiently are be patient with the text and be patient with yourself. Right? Maybe at first when you read the text, it's like, wow, this is daunting. I don't understand this. What's going on? It's so dense. Because oftentimes, how many of us know we're in the Scripture and it's somewhat intimidating because it's dense. There's so much information, packed in a small area. And so what we have to do is be patient with the text. Know that as you continue to read it and study it and get into it, it'll become clearer. Be patient with the text. And also be patient with yourself, he talks about. Don't beat yourself up if you're like, I don't get this, and throw the Bible down and say, I'm just going to get a commentary, or I'm just going to get a devotional and read that instead of reading the Bible. Right? The Bible is the best commentary. So be patient with the text, he says, and be patient with yourself in reading the text. So this is the 3rd strategy that he talks about, 3rd strategy of first-rate reading. And it's read patiently, and that was chapter 10. God bless you guys.